Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for session 9, Cooling for All, Gender, Inclusion, and Ownership in Agricooling. Throughout the day, we've explored the different steps involved in an agri-cooling journey, from feasibility to design and then to financing. Yet, what is it that keeps these efforts truly alive and thriving? In our third session of the day, we focus on what truly sustains impact, which is community involvement and ownership. Before we dive in, a quick note. For anyone interested in a deeper dive into your virtual cold chain assistance data science based app, Cultivate, there's a live session happening right now. This session will walk you through the app and the onboarding toolkit, how to access it, what it offers, and how to start using Cultivate on your own. And best of all, it's all completely free to use. To join, scroll down to the link section at the bottom of the page, just past all the speaker bios, and click on session 10, What is Cultivate and how can the onboarding kit support its adoption? Back to our session. Today, we'll explore how inclusive design, gender responsive training, community ownership, and equitable governance can enable fair and sustainable access to agri-cooling. We're bringing together perspectives from both academia and on ground practice to showcase approaches for integrating gender equality and social inclusion into cooling solutions. Today, we have the privilege of being joined by three very distinguished panelists who have been working to make cooling more local and more inclusive. Firstly, we have Asha Singh, a research fellow at the Center for Sustainable Cooling at the University of Birmingham. Asha has contributed to developing tools for assessing cooling and cold chain needs through a GESI lens and has led research on the two-way link between gender inclusion and cold chain systems. Thank you for being with us here today, Asha. Mohammadou Saido Balde is our second speaker, who is a sustainable energy, climate, and agribusiness consultant. He has done it all with expertise in energy systems, climate policy, and community engagement. He currently coordinates the Your Virtual Coaching Assistant project in Guinea-Bissau. And lastly, we have with us Faith, who's joining us live from the field in Nigeria. So please bear with us in case there are any technical issues. But through her leadership with Leap Energy and Adonai Foods, she's been raising farmer awareness on cooling and developing innovative methods to engage female farmers. Welcome to all three of you. Before we get started, let's do a quick poll together. Once the poll is live, I would like you to type in a word that answers the question of what comes to mind when you first hear the term localization. We will just give 15 minutes for the answers to come in, and after that, we will see what the results showcase. Well, I think that's sufficient time. Maybe let's see if we can see the response that has come in. We see a few words coming in. There's organization, there's home, there's basic access, absolutely. Some more, minimum imports, agency, a very important word. Well, I think these are all very, very interesting points that contribute towards the process of localization. And it's good to see that we're already thinking about things beyond capacity building. Because many a times when we first use the word localization, what comes to mind is capacity building. And while capacity building complements localization, it's not localization in itself. And even when we think about capacity building, what we need to start thinking about is, are we truly responding to local needs, or are we still coming in with our external agendas? While we won't be diving into the topic of capacity building and what it means for localization in a lot of detail, what we will be doing today is exploring ways to think about localization beyond capacity building. And even when we do talk about capacity building, we will see what sort of frameworks help us respond to what the communities actually want and need. Um, so, with that, I would actually like to invite our first panelist, Asha. And to her, my question would be, Asha, often those that are most left out during the process of localization are women and marginalized groups. And even when their needs are acknowledged, programs often tend to go for those that are the most accessible, not the most excluded. So, from your research, what gender and social inclusion disparities exist across the cooling and cold chain sector? And how can the GESI framework help ensure equal and inclusive opportunities? Over to you, Acha.
Thank you, Simran. Good afternoon, everyone. And I'll talk a bit more in detail about this in my presentation as well in different components. But one of the key things I would like to highlight is that, like you mentioned, when we talk about the localization within the framework of the Clean Cooling Network, who I'll be representing today, presenting the work that I'm doing under them, we focus on the localized needs, shared ownership, and decision making with the community that we are working for. So it goes beyond transferring the skills and knowledge from centralized research centers to the local community. It goes beyond that, voicing their needs, giving their needs the way they see it, a better, much more elevated platform that it has been given before. So yeah, I'll stop at that, but I'll come back to it in my presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Asha. I think with that, you can already start your presentation and sort of set the stage for how to start thinking about localization and inclusion in cooling through the GESI lens.
Thanks, Simran. Can you see my presentation now? Just confirming if you can see my presentation.
Your presentation, please go ahead.
Yes.
Yes, we Asha, can you hear us?
Yes. Could you see?
Okay. Yeah, we were able to see your
Okay,
presentation.
great. Yeah, just confirming. Okay, great. Yeah, thanks, Simran. I'll continue with my presentation. So as Simran introduced, I'm a research fellow at the Center for Sustainable Cooling based at the University of Birmingham. So today I'll be focusing mostly on the work that I do under the Clean Cooling Network. I'm also a PhD candidate who's investigating gender responsive innovations for the sustainability transitions at UCL. So this is very close to heart topic for me, and it's my privilege to be presenting among you all in this session 9 for Cooling for All. Let me introduce Clean Cooling Network very briefly. The idea was conceived in 2019 to use clean cooling approach to increase the adoption and uptake of the resilient, efficient, and inclusive climate-friendly cooling and cold chain technologies and services. So with that in mind, the sustainable cooling and cold chain solutions, the project, the way we approach, there are two different delivery approach. One is with the physical centers and hubs, and the other is the online platform. The centers of excellences that we have are more focused on the regional research, testing of the innovative technologies, transferring the knowledge. It creates a platform for the global collaborations. Whereas the specialized outreach knowledge establishment, in short, we call it spokes, are more focused on localizing this regional knowledge into the local country context or the community context that we are working. So we already have one established spokes in Kenya, but there are more in the pipeline. The main 9 working focus pillars of the CCN networks, as you see on the screen here, are around inclusive capacity building and training, finance and business model, model, system design, technology and innovation, focusing on health resilience, enabling policies, focusing on the consumer needs or the market needs, and localized manufacturing assembly, but also looking at the energy transition. So besides that, the Clean Cooling Network also provides an online knowledge platform for delivering the knowledge transfer from the research collaborations that's happening across the multiple partners, but also a community of practice across different topical areas that I presented here. And with all of these 9 pillars, in the core lies the environment, people, and culture. So it comes with the knowledge and the sensitivity towards localizing the knowledge that we mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation, but also engaging with the local partners and giving the ownership and the decision-making power over to the local partners and the implementing partners. So in this presentation, I'll quickly run you through some of the why keeping GESI, gender equality and social inclusion principle in mind, and how we do it. And besides that, some of the examples and the tools that we have developed to deliver that in our implementation. So one of the things that came up very early on with the establishment of CCN through our research is that there is a gap in research looking at this bidirectional impact of GESI on cooling and cold chain, whereas the other way around, the cooling and cold chain, how does it impact the GESI goals? So since there is this void of knowledge, the evidence, it was not understood how we can tap the value that's been untapped. So the reason why we need the evidence is so that we can strengthen the GESI policies and programs and mainstream them into the cooling and cold chain projects and programs and businesses, but also to allocate resources for the GESI analysis and integration so that it opens up the possibilities for the social innovations. So through our research, we came to a conclusion that usually when GESI is at the heart of your work, it's usually looked through the lens of access and participation, but there is a one missing element that we want to bring at the forefront is focusing on the needs. Even before you focus on the access and participation, understanding the needs in reference to the social, economic, social, cultural, political, like in a more localized context was a missing element. So we add a third element to the access and participation principles. So these, the intersection of needs, access, and participation became our work's main pillars in terms of how we approach in integrating GESI in the cooling and cold chain programs, but also we identified some of the key parameters that is missing to come up with the localized evidence to quantify the value that's lost or the value that we could gain by integrating GESI principle into the cold chain, or bringing in cold chain and the cooling services to meet the GESI goals. It's both way around. So some of the key parameters that we have identified across these 3 main pillars and the evidences that we are looking at both qualitative and quantitative methods. So around needs, like I mentioned, we're also focusing on the not only the practical needs, but also the strategic needs to go beyond that and shifting the power and giving more agency to the people who are actually using the cooling technologies and services. With access, it's access to capital, trainings, informations about the innovative technologies, but also disparities of these access across different intersectional groups, whereas participation is mainly around the workforce participation and decision-making participation, looking at it from the holistic point of view. So in next couple of slides, I'll briefly run through some of the differences that we found in needs, access, and participation. And this is mainly to the work that's been done by big multinational research organizations and think tanks in both health and agriculture. They have established a global level data on some of the disparities or the differences in needs. Let's start with the needs, and I'll run through a few of the examples, whereas there is more than the few of the examples that I presented here. Let's start with the girls' and women's needs in excess in terms of the difference of needs. In regards to the health, it has been shown that the women and girls are more disproportionately affected by diseases, heat stress, and premature deaths, which are related to the heat stress and the increase in temperature. So, which also means that there are diseases where women and girls are more affected by the vaccine, lack of vaccine excess, which is around the data that we're looking at is the cervical cancer, especially among the rural population of women and girls who have less access to the HPV vaccine in their early teens. Similarly, there is also a difference in needs when it comes to women because in most of the global data, it shows that the women makes like 41% of the farm labor force, which goes up to 65% in some of the sub-Saharan African countries, which says that women are the one who are working mostly on the post-harvest management and storage of the produce in the early on at the farm gate level. So any kind of disparity in excess means that there is a greater loss in value. So similarly, in terms of the displaced populations, as we know, most of the displaced populations have barriers to access a formal education, which means it's harder for the displaced population get into the mainstream higher education and higher technical degrees to get into the cold chain jobs. So, which means the kind of trainings and the technical skill program that we need to design for the displaced population to integrate them into the cold chain system of the at the national level means it has to be much more tailored. So these are some of the examples to show how the needs are different across different marginalized groups. Similarly, some of the disparity in access. There are data which shows that out of 1 billion people who are at high risk due to lack of access, 53% of them are women, which means if you translate this disparity in access into the loss in value, it directly, you can look at this correlation to how female-headed households would lose more than 8% of their income under the heat stress condition compared to the male-headed households. So there is a correlation when you look at the disparity in access with cold chain services as well as the technologies, because 1 in 4 young farmers only have access to modern agriculture technologies, which cold chain technology is also part of this analysis. And then due to which the loss in value which results means 15% of the annual income among the 470 million small farmer holders is lost because of the lack of access to the cold chain systems. And with an example from the health sector, the health facilities in rural areas, only 90% of them have reliable cold chain equipment, and 20% do not have any access at all, which means 25% of the vaccines is wasted in the supply chain, even before it reaches from the manufacturing plants to the population that really needs it. So, which means in relation to the loss in value, you can see the disparity in access plays quite a big role. Similarly, disparity in participation when it comes to in terms of the workforce, but also as a decision-making level. With the current participation, only 6% of the employees in the HVAC sector out of the 15 million are women. And only 21% of the senior positions at the director levels are occupied by the women. Similarly, the age, if you look at the workforce age groups, it's mostly made out of the certain people after in the aging workforce, which means the young people are missing from the picture. And the women are the young farmers' participation as the entrepreneurs and the business owners of the cold chain services are quite significantly lower. So all of these, if you change this scenario and bring equity and participation, there will be a gain in value due to the inclusion, diversity, and equity, or if you apply that principle. Similarly, there are some of the ways, I'll just use 2 examples. So the women, the small-scale women farmers are known to yield more outputs, even with the fewer inputs as compared to the large-scale farmer. And these are some of the evidence that's already been built out there that we can mobilize to use as a lobby to bring in more resources. And similarly, when you look at the organizational level, having more diversity and inclusion means there is 35% financial outperformance in a more diverse working environment. So these are some of the ways you can think about how disparity in needs, access, and participation, if done right, reduced or mitigated, can have an added value in the coaching sector. So some of the ways, so I think I'll stop at that for why. But in regards to how, so how can we use GESI lens to kind of deliver the equitable and inclusive cold chain or the cooling sector that we are promising or that we are striving for. Some of the ways to institutionalize GESI, there are various entry points for GESI. That's one thing to understand, is that it's ideal to do GESI integration at the very beginning, but even if we miss that, there are different ways. So that's the entry, in terms of the entry points, depending upon where we pick up GESI principle, there is a way to integrate or institutionalize GESI in your schooling and cold chain programs and projects and businesses. And it's quite challenging to mainstream GESI if it's not a standalone GESI project. So it's very important to keep in mind that not all GESI interventions come with the additional cost. Sometimes it's just about changing that lens and reallocating some of the existing resources. And also keeping in mind that GESI is not always about women and girls, but it's access for all. So some of the intersectional identities of the individual and groups, if that's prioritized, that also count towards the social inclusion goals that we mentioned earlier. And also establishing early on that GESI will not be used just as a variable to tick box in an output, but also established as a practice. So what I mean by that is that creating some of the ways GESI can be included in the organizational HR policies, integration into the resource, the budgeting, capacity building and awareness within the organization itself, and changing some of the work culture and the industrial norms, but not only looking at the integration in the programs and the projects or the businesses. So making it much more intentional and accountable throughout the program cycle, and rather than just looking at it as the normative way to be inclusive. So keeping all these different principles in mind, we have developed different kind of GESI sensitive or GESI responsive tools around needs assessment, theory of change, monitoring, evaluation, and learning frameworks, business models. So all these different frameworks, when they are like, when you apply the GESI principle, what you are saying is that you do what you always have been doing, but include some of the new parameters into it. For example, I'll give you an example of a theory of change. As for most of the people who have worked in the development sector knows that theory of change has certain components that you focus on. For example, the target groups, their needs, the impacts, outcomes, and activities. But what we propose in the more GESI sensitive theory of change is that also bring in forefront the context that you're working in, some of the assumptions or the preconditions that needs to be there for the activities to result in the outputs, so forth. So like, prioritizing that context and the preconditions are very key when you're talking about GESI sensitive theory of change. And the similar thing applies for the business model. We usually use the business canvas as a way to develop a business model. And usually the business canvas has the 9 key components where you look at the key activities and partners, customer relations, value propositions, cost and revenues. What we bring forward is that look at this each component with the GESI lens in mind, but also add risk and mitigations for unintended consequences and some of the barriers for adoption. And again, with the GESI lens in mind, how different groups would be facing different kind of barriers to adopt this business model. So these are some of the ways we have proposed and developed tools which we use in our training programs to train our in-house researchers and the project implementers, but also we have designed projects which is based on this principle. So again, with all these project implementation tools that I just mentioned, one of the key things, there are some of the examples that I'll give you. It's always important to keep in mind that there, like I earlier mentioned, that there is a lack of evidence of data, but then there is a lack of evidence of data is because it's really time consuming and expensive to collect intersectional data when your project is not a standalone GESI project. So it's always important to mind that you prioritize some of the indicators that you want to collect, but also keep in mind which of these indicators feed which goals. And every partners that come together to deliver a project, whether it's a short-term or the long-term goals, depending upon who you're talking about, um, their indicators could look different. For example, in terms of the reduction in a food loss would be something a funding agency would be more interested in. But if you think from the local farmers' perspective, they will be within the same program, what their main goal would be to increase in the production volume and the trade of food and the market access. So within the same program, you have to bear in mind that the indicators and the goals could look slightly different. So you need to prioritize sometimes how you collect the data to feed in some of the outputs and the outcomes. And we also have to focus on different indicators, not only make it more realistic indicators in such a way that it's more realistic goals within the time scale and the resources that there is, but also it should also reflect the local needs and the local values. For example, there is the three principles the pillars that I mentioned: needs, access, and participation. If you apply each of these pillars or the principles across the indicators, the GESI responsive indicators will look slightly different. So I think that's another thing to keep in mind, how you formulate these GESI indicators and goals without compromising some of the long-term sustainability as well. The other example that I would like to share is that when you do the intersectional GESI analysis across some of the key parameters that I'm showing here around knowledge and skills, labor division, lack of access to capital, and social norms and prejudices, we'll have to bear in mind that incorporating some of the local context and the voices is important, but also it is also important to involve the local communities in the data construction and creating meaning out of it. So when you are involving the local enumerators and the local communities to make sense of some of the GESI data that you have collected, it's very important also to maintain follow the compliance of the GDPR and protect some of the personal information, and only collect the necessary data. So these are some of the key principles as you're gathering data and involving communities. So this is the last slide. I would like to conclude with some of the key opportunities that there is in GESI integration in the cold chain sector and cooling sector. As the emerging communities, the economies are growing, it's predicted that the cooling demand would go by 45% by 2050, which means you need more skilled human resource in the sector to adapt the passive cooling strategies, but also high efficient cooling technologies. So which means it allows you that space and opportunities to train then a workforce which is much more inclusive. Similarly, there is an opportunity to mobilize women and youth who are well positioned in the communities to take up the roles of the trainers, social mobilizers, but also bring in some of the diverse perspectives and their own lived experiences, which is usually left out. And also because most of the time, this social innovation that you're trying to focus is accounts 90% of the success, because only 10% of the technologies are adopted based on the technological merit. So I think that's another reason why it's important to bring in much more diverse community voices into the cooling and cold chain sector program. And there are some of the already established evidences around how having women leaders in the companies leads to more climate sustainability and the more improved ESG, which is the environmental, social, and governance standards. So capitalizing in some of these positive narratives would be one way to integrate GESI in your own cold chain programs and policies. With that, I would like to conclude my presentation here, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have in the discussion section. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Asha. Your insights really did underscore that inclusion, of course, must be designed into our cooling projects from the outset. But even if not, there are other entry points. In the end, the idea is to do it with intentionality and with a lot of effort. And also that all the work that we do in terms of GESI integration requires careful consideration across multiple dimensions, such as the ones you highlighted: access, needs, and participation. And most importantly, to avoid the assumption that women or even marginalized communities are one homogeneous group. So all these dimensions need to be applied intersectionally. And hopefully, this is something that we can come back to towards the end. Taking forward your point on access, needs, and participation, I would like to now bring on Mohammedu, who's been working on integrating communities into running the cold rooms. So, my question to you, Mohammedu, would be in your work in Guinea Bissau, are these three accesses of uh, access, needs, and participation helpful in helpful frameworks for thinking about inclusion? And beyond that, just to think about whether we currently, in not doing so, are treating cold rooms as merely technology deployments rather than community enterprises. So, what would it look like to design and deliver cold storage that is a part of a living economy, a living local economy, co owned, co managed, and financially sustainable, and financially sustained by the people who rely on it? With that, I hand over to you for the presentation. Oh, sorry, Mamadou, we don't hear you. While we wait for Mamadou, Mamadou, do you want to try again? Okay, while we deal with technical difficulties, which are a part of every webinar, we we will give Mamadou a minute to test his mic, and I think he's back. Mamadou, can you try speaking to us again? If not, let's try to bring on our next speaker, Faith. Let's see if she's able to connect as well. Hello, Faith. It's really nice to have you. I know we might not be able to see you, but let's see if we can hear from you. My question for you is similar, and based on everything that Asha has shared, right, on Jesse integration, I know you have a lot of experience of really being on ground and working with communities. And so my question to you would be, how has gender integration actually been implemented in cold chain projects, and what does the process look like, and which are the aspects that are often overlooked but are very crucial when we're engaging women and other marginalized groups in cooling projects? Please do try to share with us specific examples of strategies that have worked.
All right, thank you so much. It's great to be on the show. So, from my experience or the on the ground, you know, show, I would say that gender integration of cold chain has moved from, you know, quote and unquote, a checklist activity to a more intentional and practical process that empowers both men and women across, the value chain. Now, often take implementation of this often start with community level engagement, and that is what we did in our station where we installed the code room. Now, understanding the specific role uh, of this operation in terms of women, understanding their role helped us to, place them that these women are they are valuable, they are related in food production, in handling, and then of course in marketing. So by observing this, we were able to achieve a landmark of success. Now, in the rural cold chain project that we conducted, we discovered that women are key players. Women are the key players in post-harvest loss and handling, and in local markets distribution of items. Now, this, on the other hand, we were able to, notice that women were excluded from training sections and access to cold storage facility. They were not included in cold storage facility due to social norms, due to time constraints, and the lack of ownership rights. So we were able to bridge this gap. To address this situation, we focused on specific strategies. The first thing we did, we targeted capacity building. We dealt with capacity building. Training schedules were, adjusted for these women to fit their daily routines. And sessions we held were done at the community centers where it was easier for them to participate in the training. And also, we discovered that this significantly improved the women's participation in the cold room management and record keeping activities. Another thing we did was the inclusive business method. We introduced women-led cooperatives that managed cold room operations, and we provided, materials for this training. And also, we saw that this training proved successful in all areas. An example to this would be one of our rooms. We discovered that women themselves, they aggregated themselves together to take charge by, storing vegetables, fresh items, fresh produce during production season, right? And this happened in 2024, and till it started late 2024 till early 2025. Now, this process that they did, it created an avenue where they were identified, and it strengthened not only the work that they were doing, it was also possible for them to achieve this great fleet as a team, right? Now, they implemented this aggregation process by collecting fees using the Cultivate app and technology. The Cultivate app also helped them achieve this by putting aside, 5 kg. Now, when they store in some products, we're able to, take out 5 kg of each of their stored produce in the cold room. So whatever they brought into the cold room, upon registration, they will take out a portion, 5 kg of it, and store. So we aggregated this on their behalf and later sold it off during off season. And this sales that was realized produced what we called they produced a setup where we have to now set up another cold room. It was another cold room operation in the community in Nasarawa State in Nigeria. Now, while this was going on, we also noticed financial inclusion of the women. We noticed that these women were, financially involved, and we saw the sustainability of this project in the long run. Another thing we also did for this project was gender sensitivity infrastructural design. We noticed that though it was small, and it was not noticed in a larger scale, but it produced a great result. It was crucial. Now, what did we do with that infrastructure? We provided lighting for safety. We created, separate areas for women, and we ensured clear pricing transparency that encouraged more women to use our facility. Ah, shit. This was what I'm trying to find it.
Hello, Faith. I think we lost you there briefly. In case um, once you're ready, please let us know, and then we can bring you back on. But what's important to take away from your discussions is, of course, to see how a lot of the things that we discuss in theory, how we put it into practice. And I know somebody else working on doing this is Mohamedou. So I would now like to invite Mohamedou onto stage to share with us how they've been working on community inclusion and the inclusion of women in marginalized groups in Guinea-Bissau. So over to you, Mohamedou.
Thank you, Simran. I hope you can hear me now.
Perfect, yes.
Uh, Thank you very much once again, and putting up this stage. So, first of all, as you just mentioning about localization, how it goes beyond the capacity building, and with ecosystem build, building and system transformation. So before that, and to talk about access or needs, we really have to understand the context. So this is where I bring you a bit of a context on what is how Guinea-Bissau agricultural value chain look like. Um, First of all, is to say that around 84% of our populations are farmers, in which 80% workforce is represented by women, and around 88% of uh, these farmers are smallholder farmers. So that can give you an idea of how it is important developing the agricultural value chain, especially for cold chain value chain. So for that, we understand what is needed to be done. So first of all, next slide. So you have to see how do you build this ecosystem? How do you transform the system itself? So it's where we brought up the idea of setting up a business model that bring innovations but also empower the local communities, and what will be the suitable business model that can make the system that or the technology that we are bringing in sustainable. And the second thing is that we know we are at the age of digital transformation. So it is very important also to understand how we bring these tools together at the local level to make them also useful for them to increase the transparency and increase the system management and etc. And the third aspect is the capacity building, which is of course the foundation of making the two components comes together and make them much more empowered and taking forward whatever coming in. So for that, in terms of localization or need assessment, if you go to next slide, as I said, you have first of all to understand um, the, the the needs, the local needs, what is available in terms of products, and also for to understand the local context, what really the farmers needs and how the environments look like. For instance, there was a needs assessment, post-harvest assessment conducted that shows that more than 30% of the produce in Guinea-Bissau are losses. So that will give you an idea of what are the technologies that are needed. The next slides, please. In the sense of the need assessment, we also try to see in terms of identifying what is the best technology fit. We conducted um, some local experiments with passive cooling, which is using clay pots that are available technologies in the country, but also to see how to compare the results with the passive cooling technologies. So for this will enable you to understand what are the locations, where to locate the cold rooms that or the technologies that we are putting in this region. So the project here in Guinea-Bissau is located in 4 regions, as you can see in the picture. We have Bafata, which is the technology is located in the market, in the local, the main market of Bafata, which is in the east region. You have also Gabu, which is also located in the east region. So for us, locating these technologies in the main market have a huge benefits. And that will also bring us to the next point, which is how to structure the governance and how to, for the business model that we are developing, how to make the participation of other stakeholders feasible and also sustainable. If you can show the next slide, please. So for that, you have to understand what are the market barriers and what are the upfront costs, what are the risks, and how this is related with the um, the long-term management, how to make the sustainable, the technology, the financially sustainable. And for that, we set up a governance structure. Next slide, please. For that, we set up a governance structure, and to see how the ownership with the business model that we are proposing can work. So for that, we end up putting, as you can see in the main and the slide, a governance that we believe can work with the local context based on the result that we had with the needs assessment, but also understanding the importance of participation. So here the main things is that we have local NGOs that already have a place, that have the ownership of the land and etc. And then how now we link them with the micro entrepreneurs that are available locally. For them, it is very important that the ecosystem itself work. So who will take care of mostly the market linkage? Who will mobilize products? Who will make sure that the cold room is always full? Who make sure that the products that we are storing also sold out? So this is where we brought up this approach of bringing the cold room, but then using the business model that we call CAS, which is basically cooling as a service. So, and for that, we have 2 sides of the business model or related to our governance structure. If you go to the next slide. So basically, the business model is one hand is that, as we said, we have the NGO as the main, the beneficiary will be basically to keep the system running in terms of giving guarantee that the cooling as a service is working for maintenance costs, also for paying the salaries that because you had a manager there and you had to operate it to make sure that these people receive monthly salaries that can enable them also to demonstrate the interest and keep the cooling safe and also sustainable. And the two other aspect is the reserve fund, which is very important in this business model, which basically is that as a system itself, after few years, you have to change some component of the system. For instance, it's an autonomous system working with PV solar systems, and you have to change it in the long term. So for that, you have to start working on the reserve fund that will allow you in the future to make these operations and also replacement for some components. And the second branch of this business model is to make sure that this entrepreneur also can scale up their business. So with this, they can use X percentage for crates in order to also to increase the mobilization from the farmers, because in Guinea-Bissau, you have a lot of farmers working on horticulture during the dry season. So there's sometimes a lot of produce, but they don't have enough time to go to the market and stay and sell their produce or their products. So here, the micro entrepreneur will play a huge and very important role. But this is something that I would like to say that is not a fixed. So it's something that also depends on the creativity and the innovation that the market entrepreneurs that's also have. So it's where we developed a lot of capacity building to empower them with the skills, but also to inspire them to be able to think beyond the system that they are, and how they increase the ecosystem building within this a single technology that we have. What are other opportunities that this technology itself can bring and open up doors for many more um, other business opportunities. So we have been working a lot in the capacity building and leadership and ecosystem building. If you go to the next slide, and especially showing them how much this single technology can bring other opportunities in terms of business opportunities, which is related to transport, which is also related to the production. Because what we have been hearing from farmers is that we produce a lot, but when we bring this, since we don't have a cold room storage or storage capacity, this basically what we do, we just go and sell our product in a low price, because we know at the end of the day we will lose a lot. So when they have access to cold rooms, this of course will increase and motivate them a lot to in terms of increasing the production from their side. It's not only that, this is also will link the cold room with schools. There's a lot of initiatives from schools feeding program, but also healthcare sectors in terms of nutrition programs. So this cold room also will serve as a, an important point to link between the public services, healthcare, and schools. And this is another project, I mean, another business opportunity that can open up the doors. So basically, to answer your question, was this was the slide and also experience that I wanted to share with you. This is at the end of my presentation. So if there is any further question, I will be happy to answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mamadou, for taking us through everything that has been done in order to really integrate the community into feeling like that the cold room is a part of their local ecosystem. I know we do not have much time, so I would like to actually invite all the speakers on stage and only ask you one question, a difficult one, given that it's difficult to summarize everything in a statement. But given that localization and GESI are becoming more and more important topics that a lot of people are trying to work towards, uh, not always with success, what do you think is one very important step that often gets forgotten or ignored? And what would be your recommendation on integrating it? If you have an example, that would be great as well, because of course, seeing is learning. So maybe we can start with you, Asha.
Thanks, Simran, and thanks, Mohamedou and Faith, for sharing your presentation. It is really a pleasure to be sharing this session with you all. To quickly address since Simran said one, I'm going just to focus one. One of the things that when we're thinking about, especially in the context of the project that I'm working under right now, the Clean Cooling Network, where we have a multi-partner collaboration across different universities across the US, as well as implementing partners in Africa and in India. So this huge collaboration, cross-cutting, like, we are the people who work across in academia and the program implementation across different cross-cutting sectors. So I think there is a lot of knowledge that's being generated in these kind of projects. And whenever you're thinking of transferring, connecting back to the dots that we discussed in this session, localizing the knowledge transfer and the shifts in power to own that knowledge and to kind of localize to the context, but also not only to the national context, but also to the community context. We have to bring in all these components, all the actors that's involved as a part of the implementation, but also beyond, and understand how do you scale this knowledge at the national level and the local context, and give agency to the people for whom this knowledge is created, using whose data this knowledge is created. I think that's a key for the sustainability, and also transferring knowledge in such a way that the community people who will be using this knowledge has the power and agency to capitalize on the knowledge to gather more funds and investments in the long run. So instead of just looking at it as a project and a short-term business, making it much more sustainable. I think I'd like to stop at that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Asha. You're right. I think we started the session with the word agency and we've come back to it. In the end, the idea is that those who benefit from it also make decisions on how they want to run it and how they want to integrate it into their lives. With that, Mamadou, I think I pose the same question to you based on your experience. What do you
Yeah.
think is one thing that's overlooked?
Thank you very much. I think Asha already said it all. So, first of all, I think it is very important to understand the local context, and try to tailor the project with the local context, and to make them understand, but also this knowledge and technology transfer, and also beyond the knowledge and technology transfer, how to build this ecosystem, and how to make it gradually prosperous, because it's very important that the people after the project, people keep running the project. And for that, you have to really build a very strong governance structure that is able to continue building ecosystem, but also continuously making the projects sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, both of you. I think there's a lot to learn, and especially a lot of on-ground implementation that a lot of other companies that are working in similar fields can build upon. So what we've heard today reinforces that cooling isn't just about technology; it's about trust, participation, and also shared ownership. And whether it be through gender responsive design, inclusive training, or community driven management, true sustainability in agri-cooling comes when people both own the processes as well as the outcomes. Thank you all for joining us. You can take today's insights further by exploring your VCCS onboarding kit, which includes videos, Excel tools, and comics for every step of the agri-cooling journey. And you can also stay connected with us through the base newsletter. You will find the QR code on screen right now. Or please feel free to reach out to us at info@yourvcca.org. I know that you would like to keep the conversation going with our speakers, so please note that the presentations and the recordings will be made available to you post the event, and please feel free to connect with them. Up next is our final content-related session of the day, which focuses on market linkages. Don't miss it. And over to our next moderator.